All right. Well, welcome to the fall. I can't believe we're walking into this fall. And as we do, we're beginning this new conversation. Before I get there, I just want to reinforce, if you are not part of a group, we have new groups starting right now. Make sure that you're part of a group. Don't just watch this conversation, be part of this conversation with us. And today we're beginning a brand new series, brand new conversation called Unequal. And we're going to be, over the next few weeks, we're going to be wrestling through something that inside of our culture, all of us are wrestling through. And to be honest with you, historically, as people, we have wrestled with. And I as I step into this, and as we step into this together, I just want to encourage you. I think God has something really powerful to say to this. I think this conversation is going to be incredibly encouraging, because for many of us, I think we're looking at it and saying, well, how do we move forward? I think God has something in this for us. And I think that God, as our Father, wants to come alongside of us and take us by the hand and lead us through this. Now, for those of you who are joining us, who are just beginning to explore who Jesus is and what this God thing is about, you have to understand that that's how we view this. We believe that God has made it possible for us to be adopted into his family, and that as we engage life, that he wants to, as our Father, take us by the hand and lead us through this journey together. And so we want for you to be able to experience that as we engage this conversation. It's a phenomenally complicated conversation. It really is. And here's the thing. We have a problem, and it's not just a virus problem. It's not just a problem with the fact that schools have gone back virtually. It's not just a problem with the fact that you've run out of Netflix shows. That we have a problem when it comes to understanding the complexity of this idea of equality. We don't really know what to do with it. And unfortunately, rather than this being a conversation in which we engage and wrestle through this for hours as we're trying to work through the complexity of it, unfortunately, rather than that being our experience, too often the experience is that we just have memorized sound bites that we throw at one another. And in the process, we don't understand it any better than we did before. And so what I want to do over the next few weeks is I want to work through some of that complexity. We're not going to be able to walk through all of it. There's no way. But to work through some of that complexity and look at some powerful things that I think God speaks into it, and things that he calls us to demonstrate in the midst of it. But as I said, it's phenomenally complicated because we hear God speak to this, and we read passages where it says things like, it doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Gentile, slave or free, and he talks about the unity of the family and all that goes into that, and then there's also the reality that from the time we were just children, we memorized this line that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and we've memorized this line that drove not just the American Revolution, but it drove the Emancipation Proclamation. It drove the Civil Rights Movement, and all that we've been working to see happen and to see change, and so we interact with those things, and we hear that. But then here's the problem. We're all created different. Not just that groups of us are different, like every one of us is different. And God decides as he puts this thing in motion, he decides for us to be, each of us individually, uniquely created. All of us different. And I don't know that we know exactly what to do with that. And we're different in almost every way you could imagine. We're different in terms of our intellect. We're different in terms of our physical being. We're different athletically. We're different in terms of our personality. We're different in almost every way that you could imagine. And as we walk through this, it's interesting that God not only creates us that way, but God celebrates that. These differences, that we're different in terms of our tone of skin. It's interesting. My boys are actually different in terms of the tone of their skin based on what time of year it is. And so in the summer, people think that Anna is related to my boys. And for those of you who don't know, my wife's from Ecuador. And so in the summer, people believe that Anna is related to the boys. In the winter, people believe that I'm related to the boys. In the summer, I just try to tan so that people will still think I'm part of the family. And we're different in so many different ways. And God not only creates us that way, but then he actually celebrates it. Listen to how he talks about differences in terms of the body in Romans chapter 12. He says, "For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment." We're going to come back to that as we move through today. He says, "In accordance with the measure of faith that God has given you, just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not have all the same function, so in Christ, we who are many form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. We have different gifts according to the grace God has given us. If a man's gift is prophesying, let him use it in proportion to his faith." And in this very interesting moment, Paul, as God's using him to speak to the church, says, no, you're all very different, and you're gifted differently. Not only are you created differently, but then you're gifted differently. And there's different levels of giftedness as well. Jesus talks about it in terms of talents. Listen to what he says. He says again, and he's talking about the kingdom of heaven. He says, "It will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To the one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2, to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey." And you see that, you see this difference. And we all understand this. Like, we know this about ourselves. If you've been watching for the past several weeks, you know Chris is not as funny as Anthony. Like, just, there's no comparison. It's not even close. And when I try to be, it doesn't go well. I've tried it a couple times. It doesn't work well. We're not the same. I'm not as gifted a speaker as Andy Stanley or John Piper. I'm not. We're not the same in that way. And God, as he creates us, well, he doesn't just create groups of us differently. He creates all of us uniquely different in so many different ways. And he doesn't shy away from that. He celebrates it. Why? And here's the thing. We We have historically struggled with this. We have a problem because we don't really know what to do with that. And this isn't a recent thing. We haven't just begun to struggle with this. We have struggled with this from the moment that we decided to do it our way. Now here's what I mean by that. Listen, I love Frank's song. I love My Way. I did it my way, right? But for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, because you're listening from other places in the world, just Google Frank Sinatra. He actually is from here in Hoboken. And you'll thank me later. But the reality is the idea of doing it my way did not work out so well for us in this story, because you see at the beginning as God was leading us forward, we decided, well, no, God, we don't actually think that you have what's best in store for us, and so we're going to do it our way. The scriptures actually say that all of us have gone our own way, that we've done it our way, and that doesn't work out so well. And so in the beginning, we stepped out of relationship with him. And we decided we're going to do it our way. And all of a sudden, what God created to be something really beautiful, all of a sudden we twisted it for it to become something that has been very destructive. And there are a couple of things that drive this. One is when we stepped out of that relationship with God, we created a void. We needed to belong. We needed to belong. Because here's the thing, you were created to belong. When we talk about groups, it's so important. Why? Because you were created to belong. And in the beginning, we step out of that relationship with God. We need to belong. And so we begin to form groups of people who are like us. And there's nothing inherently wrong with this. As a matter of fact, God creates us inside of families, people that you're going to have more in common with, that you're going to be closer to. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But it's not just that we had groups, but then also that we had bought into self-glorification. Now here, listen to what I want to walk us through here, because one of the primary temptations at the very beginning of this entire journey was the temptation of self-glorification. There are three fundamental temptations that we experience on an ongoing basis as we're on this journey. The first one of those is the pride of life. See, this is the temptation to be. It's the temptation for position. I want to be. This is the temptation of self-glorification. I want to be seen as the whatever it is. I want that position. I want power. This is the pride of life. Then the next is the lust of the flesh. This is the temptation for pleasure. This is not just lust as it pertains to sex. This is I want to feel. This is I want to be. I want to feel. It's the craving for pleasure, and so we take from others, and rather than living in love, we take so that we can feel. Here we take so that we can be. And then the last one is the lust of the eyes. This is I want to possess. I want to own, and so we take from others so that we can have. I want to have. And almost every temptation in life where we're tempted to choose selfishness over selflessness is one of these three things. And as Adam and Eve begin this journey, the lie that comes to them is this. Listen to what it says in Genesis chapter 3. It says, "You will not surely die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat of the fruit, your eyes will be opened, and what? And you will be like God. You will become." It's the pride of life. You can be like God. We are not equal, but he said no, you could be equal with God. And we bought into the lie of self-glorification. And And so it's not just that we have groups that we are familiar with, that we're like, but then we begin to self-glorify those groups. And so I want for my group to be seen as more significant or more important. I want for my group to be seen as better than the other group. And we begin to either belittle someone else, or we begin to, in some way, shape, or form, build ourselves up. It's literally the opposite of what he's talking about inside of Romans. But we've been doing this ever since we decided to do it our own way. As a matter of fact, just shortly after you see them buy into that lie, you see the story of Cain and Abel, where Abel is recognized and Cain isn't, and Cain is devastated by it, to the extent that he not only belittles Cain, but he actually kills him. Why? Because, no, I want to be glorified above. I want to be better than. I want to show that I'm greater than. And there's this constant drive for self-glorification. It's part of our flesh. It's the scriptures talk about it in terms of our sin nature, that we have this nature to self-glorify, to make much of ourselves at the expense of those around us. And so in our desire to belong, we separate into these groups, and then we self-glorify. And it happens in so many different situations. This can happen with any type of group. It happens with churches. And we have similar beliefs, and so we come together and we have this group, which again there's nothing inherently wrong with enjoying people who enjoy what you enjoy, or laugh about the things that you laugh about. But when that becomes at the exclusion of when self-glorification enters into that, and you begin to believe that either you are superior to, or in some way, shape, or form above, or more significant than, more important than, when you begin to ensure that those in your group have the advantages at the expense of someone else or another group, you see the result of the lie. And for generations, for all of human history, we've seen this happen. Not just recently, for all of human history, we've seen this happen time after time after time. And it can happen with any group. It can happen between cultures. It can happen between nations. It can happen between, as we've all seen, races. And at its core, racism is linked to just this, the self-glorification. No, my group is better than. And for many of us, we've experienced this in different ways, because even inside of groups, you can experience this. And so even inside of white culture, there are groups who look down on other groups. Inside of black culture, there are groups who look down on other groups. It's interesting, because having the opportunity to live both in the North and the South, I can tell you that there are those in the North who look down on those from the South, and those in the South who look down on those who are from the North. It's the very same thing. Now, for those who are black and are part of our family, they've experienced this, continue to experience this on an ongoing basis. You see, we have a problem. And we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do with the fact that we're all different. And this drive inside of us for self-glorification, well, it's led to some of the greatest atrocities in history, hasn't it? As groups As groups buy into the lie that they're better than, that they're superior to, that they in some way, shape, or form are greater than another. And you look at this and you see that very same lie. And yet God steps into our lives, and we read it earlier, and he says this, he says, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment. And in the midst of talking about our differences, he says this to us, and it's intriguing. Well, it's intriguing, isn't it? And here's the thing. God intentionally created us different. And as we saw earlier, God celebrates the fact that we're all uniquely different. And God celebrates the fact that we're gifted differently and all of. So what is it supposed to look like? If God thinks that that's a good thing, then what is it supposed to look like? How is it supposed to work? Because we clearly haven't figured this out. We clearly continue to struggle with this. What is it supposed to look like? Next week, we begin to not just look at the problem, but begin to look at, okay, what is the dream? Will you pray with me? Father, I'm so incredibly grateful for the fact that you as our Father come alongside of us and take our hand, because we have proven that we are not good at figuring this out. And we have proven that this is not just a minor problem, but that our constant desire for self-glorification and how we want to self-glorify our group over others, how destructive and for generations that can be. And so, Dad, we just ask you to take our hand and lead us forward. And we are confident and know that you will do just that. And the reality that the dream of what you intended is far greater than what we even know. In Jesus' name, amen.